When I was 17, I used to walk home from my part-time job at a local grocery store. It was only about a 15-minute walk, and I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in upstate New York. One of those places where everyone waves when they pass you by, where neighbors share sugar and watch your dog when you're out of town. The kind of place where you think, nothing bad ever really happens here. It was late fall, early November, I think, and the days were getting shorter. So by the time I'd leave work around 7:30, it was already completely dark. Not pitch black, since most of the streets had those warm yellow streetlights, but definitely dark enough that you'd feel a little uneasy if you were walking alone. Still, I never felt like I had any reason to be worried, until one particular Thursday night. My shift had ended like normal. I said goodbye to my manager, zipped up my hoodie, and started walking home. I had my earbuds in, just listening to music, not really paying attention to anything. But I remember getting this weird feeling. You know how sometimes you just know you're being watched? That heavy, pressing feeling on the back of your neck. I turned around and didn't see anything. Just empty sidewalk and the faint glow of streetlights behind me. I shook it off and kept walking. Now, I should mention this. There's a stretch of my walk where there's a wooded lot, about 2 blocks of trees and brush that separate 2 subdivisions. No houses, just woods. It's not creepy during the day, but at night, especially when you're by yourself, it feels different. As I was passing that part, I felt the urge to take out my earbuds. I don't know why, maybe just instinct. As soon as I did, I swear I heard something. Not footsteps, more like leaves crunching, like someone taking a slow step inside the tree line. I froze. I looked directly into the woods and didn't see anything at first. Then, out of nowhere, a motion sensor light clicked on from the house across the street, and in that brief second of light, I swear, I saw the outline of a person standing between 2 trees, not moving, just standing there. They didn't flinch when the light turned on. They didn't duck or run, just stood still. I panicked and started walking faster. Not running, but fast enough that I was basically speed walking the rest of the way. I didn't look back again until I got to my street, which was maybe 4 blocks away. When I turned the corner onto my street, I stopped and looked back. Nothing, just darkness and silence. I told myself I imagined it. Maybe it was a shadow or a branch or something. That was the only way I could sleep that night. But the next night, that's when it got worse. I had the same shift, left at the same time, walked the same route. Except this time, I was completely on edge the whole time. I kept checking behind me. Nothing. I passed the wooded area again. Still nothing. But when I got home and went to unlock the front door, I noticed something weird. Our front porch light was off. My mom always kept it on if she knew I was coming home late. I figured maybe the bulb was out. I went inside and called out, "Hey, I'm home." My mom answered from the living room and asked me to come in for a second. She was sitting on the couch, looking at her phone. She looked up and said, "Did you forget your hoodie at the door?" I looked at her, confused. "No, why?" She pointed to the coat hook near the door. Hanging on the hook was a black hoodie, one that definitely wasn't mine. It was oversized, had a red stain on the cuff, and smelled like gasoline. I asked my mom if she touched it, and she said no. She thought it was mine, and I had just been careless. That's when I felt my stomach drop. I went outside and looked around. The front yard was normal, but when I checked the side gate that leads to our backyard, it was open. We always kept it latched shut. Always. At this point, I told my mom everything. About the walk, the woods, the person standing between the trees, and now this. She was visibly shaken but tried to stay calm for my sake. She said maybe someone was messing with us. Maybe a neighbor's kid being stupid. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the front window every half hour. Nothing. But until around 2 a.m. I was sitting on my bed, lights off, when I heard this faint sound, like a light scraping. It was coming from the front of the house. I peeked through the blinds and almost screamed. There was a man standing at the edge of our front lawn. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the house. He had a black hoodie on, just like the one we found inside. And here's the worst part, his head was tilted just slightly, like he was staring right at my window. I ducked down immediately and crawled to my mom's room. She was already awake. She said she heard something outside and was about to call the police. We waited, hiding behind her bed, whispering to each other. She was on the phone with 911, giving them our address. After maybe 5 minutes, we heard our front porch creak, then silence, then 3 slow knocks on the door. Not loud, just slow, rhythmic. The operator told us to stay put and that officers were already en route. About 2 minutes later, we saw red and blue lights flash through the curtains. When the police got to the porch, no one was there. But they did find footprints leading from the sidewalk to our porch, and then around the side of the house, the same side where the gate had been open the night before. They searched the yard, but didn't find anything else. We filed a report, gave them the hoodie, and even installed cameras the next day. Nothing ever came of it. But a week later, a different neighbor a few blocks down had their shed broken into. Another had their backyard motion light smashed. I don't know who it was. I don't know if they were stalking me or if I was just a random target. But for months after that, I kept my blinds shut, triple-checked every lock, and never ever walked home at night again. Even now, years later, I still think about that night. The man in the trees, and those 3 slow knocks, because someone wasn't just outside. They were waiting for me. When I was 24, I moved into a small rental house on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. I had just gone through a breakup, dropped out of grad school, and honestly needed somewhere cheap and quiet to clear my head. This house, small, old, kind of musty, sat alone at the end of a gravel road surrounded by woods. It had a porch, a creaky back deck, and way too many windows for a place that isolated. But it was affordable, and I didn't have many other options. The first week was uneventful, peaceful, even. I spent most of my days unpacking, hiking nearby trails, and trying to forget how upside down my life had become. I didn't have neighbors, no traffic, just crickets at night, and birds in the morning, and silence. So much silence. But then something changed. One night, maybe 10 days in, I was brushing my teeth in the small hallway bathroom when I heard this strange tapping sound. Not loud, just light, delicate. It came from the living room, where the old bay window faced the front yard. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth. It wasn't windy outside, and there weren't any tree branches near that part of the house. I turned off the bathroom light and crept into the dark hallway. The tapping stopped. I peeked around the corner into the living room. Nothing, just the dim outline of the couch, some boxers, and the big uncovered window. I chalked it up to the house settling, or maybe an animal. This place was full of weird noises. I went to bed and forgot about it. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I was reading in bed when I heard it. Same rhythmic tapping, same window. I grabbed my flashlight and walked into the living room. Nothing. I stepped closer to the window, shined the light out into the yard. It caught the trees, the empty gravel drive, and something else. For just a second, less than a second, I thought I saw movement, a shadow, something ducking behind a tree. But when I aimed the beam directly there, it was gone. That's when the fear started creeping in. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was alone, yes, but safe. I even installed motion lights out front and on the back deck, bought some blackout curtains, locked every door and window twice every night. But the tapping didn't stop. It got worse. Sometimes it came from the side of the house, sometimes from the back window above the sink. always late at night, always when I was alone. Sometimes it wasn't even tapping, it was a scrape, like fingernails dragging slowly across the glass. I called my landlord. He laughed it off and said the previous tenant was a little jumpy too. That didn't help. About 2 weeks in, I started hearing footsteps, not inside, outside, in the gravel, slow, crunching, deliberate footsteps circling the house. I'd sit on the floor in total darkness, holding a kitchen knife and listening to the sound of someone walking just outside, just beyond the walls. I would check the security lights. Nothing. I'd look out the peephole. Nothing. But I knew they were out there. One night, the footsteps stopped right in front of my bedroom window. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Then came the knock, just once. A single, hollow knock. I called the police that night. They showed up 30 minutes later, checked the property, and said they didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. They offered to patrol the area more often, but honestly, I think they thought I was losing it. Maybe I was, but things kept happening. I stopped sleeping, started drinking too much. I set up an old baby monitor I found at a thrift store and put one part on the porch, the other in my bedroom. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to static, then faint breathing. Not mine. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and turned up the volume. The breathing grew louder, then the tapping started again. This time on the back deck door. I grabbed the flashlight and a hammer, the only thing I had besides a kitchen knife, and crept into the kitchen. I switched on the back deck light and pulled the curtain back. There he was, a man, barefoot, wearing nothing but torn jeans. His skin was filthy, stretched tight over bone. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and bloodshot. He was smiling now, grinning like he'd won something. He tapped the glass again once, twice, 3 times. I stumbled backward, dropped the flashlight, ran into my room, and locked the door. I called the cops again, screaming that there was someone on my porch. That's time. They came faster, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. Just footprints. Muddy, human footprints leading from the woods to the deck and then nowhere. They vanished about 10 feet off the porch, like the guy had just disappeared into thin air. I was terrified, but I didn't move. I didn't have anywhere to go. A few nights later, I was in the living room reading when I heard something new. A voice. It was quiet, almost a whisper, coming from outside the window. I turned off the lamp and held my breath. The voice kept going. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like singing. A low, raspy tune, off-key, repeating. That was the last straw. I packed a bag, grabbed my cat, and drove to a friend's house an hour away. I didn't sleep that night either, but at least I wasn't alone. The next morning, I went back to grab a few more things. When I pulled up, I saw something that still haunts me to this day. On the front porch, in front of the door, was a dead rabbit. Its neck was broken, its body positioned perfectly, and in its mouth was a note, just one word scrawled in red marker: come. I moved out that day. I don't know who he was, or what he wanted, or how long he'd been watching me before I even noticed. But to this day, every time I hear tapping or see a shadow move just outside a window, I freeze, because I know someone was out there and maybe still is. This happened in November of 2023. I was living alone in a rental house, just outside of Denver. It was a short-term thing while I figured some stuff out after a breakup. The house itself was old, but fine, 2 bedrooms, tiny backyard, creaky floors. It was in a cul-de-sac, with only 5 other houses, all spaced pretty far apart, kind of the last spot before the woods started. The landlord told me the neighbors kept to themselves, and that the property hadn't been rented in a while, but it had good bones and decent Wi-Fi. So I said sure. Moved in around the second week of October. It didn't feel weird at first, maybe a little too quiet. But I chalked that up to living alone again. For the first time in years, no traffic. No roommates, no constant background noise. Just silence and squirrels. The first few weeks were totally uneventful. I worked from home during the day and watched too much Netflix at night. Sometimes I'd walk the short loop around the cul-de-sac just to feel like I wasn't rotting inside most of the other houses. Looked empty, or maybe the residents were just that private. I only ever saw one guy, an old man who lived directly across from me. He always stood by his mailbox, but I never saw him actually get any mail. He never waved, never smiled, just stared. One night I was up late working on a project. The kind of work that pulls you into a time hole where you forget to eat or blink. It was close to 2 a.m. when I decided to call it and go to bed. I remember locking the front door, turning off the lights, and getting under the covers when I heard it. 3 knocks on the front door. Not loud but clear, and spaced out like whoever was doing it wanted to make sure I heard every single one. I froze my heart immediately, went into panic mode. It was 2 in the morning, no lights outside, no cars in the driveway, number footsteps leading up to it. I didn't move for almost a full minute. I don't think I even breathed again. Grabbed my phone and checked the front door camera. I'd installed it on day 1 because paranoia is cheap insurance, but the feed was just black. I thought maybe the porch light went out, so I tapped the brightness till black, but not empty. I turned up the contrast and saw it, a shape just barely visible standing inches from the door. Too tall to be a kid, too thin to be anyone I recognized. They weren't moving, just standing there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to call the cops over some freak playing a prank, but I also didn't want to open the door, so I waited. After a few more minutes, the knocking stopped. The shape was gone. Didn't sleep. The next day I told myself it had to be some dumb kid, or maybe the camera is broken. But that night it happened again. This time, just 2 knocks. No shape, no figure, no camera feed issues. But the back porch light was Oni hadn't turned it on. That's when I started to notice little things. Garbage bin was movetta. Kitchen window was slightly cracked open. The motion light over the garage would flicker every few hours, like someone was passing in front of it, but nothing ever showed up on camera. Then one night, around 1:30 a.m., I was watching TV when the power cut out. Everything died in an instant. TV, lights, heat, silence, except for the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate, heavy ones. I crawled to the window and peeked through the side of the curtain. Someone was standing on the lawn, not the porch, just in the middle of the yard, looking at the house. It wasn't the old man across the street. This person was younger. I couldn't see their face. They had something in their hands, something long like a pipe, or maybe a bat. I reached for my phone and called 911, whispering into the mic as quietly as I could. They told me to stay on the linea, we're en route. I kept watching. Person didn't move. Just stood there. Then, as the distant sound of sirens got closer, walked away into the woods. Not ran, not panicked, just casually strolled into the tree line like they'd been on a smoke break or something. When the cops got there, they searched the area, but didn't find anything. No tracks, no signs of forced entry, no damage. They said it was probably a transient, someone looking for a place to sleep. But that didn't explain how they got past the cameras, or why the same thing kept happening night after night. I bought heavier locks, floodlights, extra cameras, but it didn't. May 10th. Next time it happened, Eddie came closer. I woke up at 3:11 a.m. to the sound of breathing, not mine, not from outside, but from inside the house. I stayed still, listening. It was slow wheezing, almost like someone had been crying 4 hours, and was trying to catch their breath. Then a single word, whispered so soft I almost thought I imagined it. Outside. I jumped out of bed, turned every light on, grabbed a bat from the closet, and ran through the house like a madman. Nothing. Doors locked, windows shut, but the back door had muddy prints in the inside. I moved out the next morning, told the landlord there was a mold issue, and left half my deposit on the table. I didn't care, just wanted out. A few weeks later I saw a listing pop up for the same house, different picture, same address. The first photo was the exterior, but in the reflection of the glass front door was a figure, tall, thin, and standing very, very still.